My name is Margaret Rose Thompson, and in July 1974, at the age of 28, I did something that no woman had ever done before at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I organized the first women's rights march in the history of one of America's most prestigious military installations, and it nearly destroyed my career, my marriage, and my future. But tonight, as I sit in my small apartment in Fayetteville, having been discharged from the Army 6 months ago, I want to tell you the true story of what happened when one female sergeant decided she'd had enough of being treated as a second-class soldier, and how a peaceful march for equality became a battle that reached the highest levels of military command and forever changed my understanding of what it means to fight for justice in America. I grew up in Zanesville, Ohio, the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress who raised 5 children during the Great Depression and World War II. My father, William Thompson, had served in the Pacific Theater and came home with stories about the courage and sacrifice required to defend freedom and democracy. "Maggie," he would tell me as we worked together in his small garage, "this country was built by people who weren't afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it cost them everything. That's what makes us American, the willingness to fight for principles even when it's dangerous." His words would echo in my mind 25 years later, when I faced the most difficult decision of my life. Growing up in the 1950s meant being surrounded by clear expectations about what women could and couldn't do, what roles we were supposed to accept, and what dreams we were allowed to pursue. But my parents had always encouraged me to think beyond traditional limitations, to work hard, and to believe that competence and character mattered more than gender. When I announced my intention to join the Army in 1968, right after graduating from high school, my mother supported my decision, even though most of our neighbors thought I was making a terrible mistake. "Margaret, the military will give you opportunities to serve your country, develop skills, and prove what you're capable of achieving," my mother told me the night before I left for basic training. "But it's also going to test your strength in ways you can't imagine. There will be people who don't want you to succeed because you're a woman, and you'll have to decide whether you're willing to fight for your place, or whether you'll accept whatever limitations they try to impose on you." Basic training at Fort McClellan, Alabama, was my first real experience with military life, and my introduction to the unique challenges faced by women in the armed forces. Out of 200 recruits in our training cycle, only 24 were women, and we were housed separately, trained differently, and held to standards that seemed designed to reinforce the message that we were visitors in a male institution, rather than equal participants in military service. The drill sergeants made it clear from the first day that they viewed female recruits as a necessary inconvenience, rather than future soldiers worthy of the same respect and opportunities given to men. "Ladies, you're here because the Army needs typists, clerks, and nurses," announced Drill Sergeant Patterson during our first formation. "Don't get any ideas about being real soldiers. Your job is to support the men who do the actual fighting, and if you can't handle that reality, you should quit now and save everyone the trouble." But there were also moments during basic training that showed me what was possible when women were given genuine opportunities to excel. During our physical training tests, I consistently scored in the top 10% of all recruits, male and female. In academic subjects like military history, leadership principles, and weapons maintenance, I frequently outperformed my male counterparts. These successes gave me confidence that I belonged in the military, but they also created tension with instructors who seemed uncomfortable when women excelled in areas traditionally dominated by men. The assignment to Fort Bragg in 1969 as a supply specialist was both exciting and challenging, as I joined one of the Army's most elite installations at a time when the military was struggling to adapt to changing social attitudes about women's roles in society. Fort Bragg was home to the 82nd Airborne Division and Special Forces units that represented the pinnacle of military professionalism, but it was also a deeply traditional institution where change came slowly and resistance to women's advancement was both subtle and pervasive. My early years at Fort Bragg were marked by steady professional growth and personal satisfaction as I mastered the complex logistics systems that kept military units supplied and ready for deployment. I earned commendations for my work, was promoted ahead of schedule, and gained the respect of many colleagues who judged me on performance rather than gender. But I also encountered daily reminders that the military viewed women as temporary participants rather than career professionals worthy of equal treatment and opportunities. The marriage to James Thompson in 1971 brought personal happiness, but also new challenges as we navigated the complexities of being a dual military couple in an institution that wasn't designed to accommodate such arrangements. James was a dedicated soldier and a supportive husband who encouraged my career ambitions, but even he sometimes struggled to understand why I couldn't simply accept the limitations that the military placed on female personnel. "Margaret, I admire your determination, but sometimes I think you're fighting battles that can't be won," James would say during our discussions about military policies that restricted women's advancement. "The system is bigger than any individual, and if you push too hard against it, you might end up getting crushed. Maybe it's better to work within the system and make gradual progress rather than trying to force dramatic changes that the institution isn't ready to accept." His concerns were valid, but my experiences over 5 years of military service had convinced me that gradual change wasn't sufficient to address the systematic discrimination that limited women's opportunities and contributions to military service. By 1974, I had reached the rank of sergeant and was serving as a section leader responsible for training and supervising both male and female soldiers. But I was still restricted from many assignments, schools, and career fields that were automatically available to my male counterparts. The incident that catalyzed my decision to organize a women's rights march occurred in June 1974, when I was passed over for promotion to staff sergeant, despite having superior performance evaluations and more experience than several male soldiers who were promoted ahead of me. The explanation given by my commanding officer was that the military needed to maintain certain ratios of male to female leadership personnel, and that promoting too many women might create unit cohesion problems. Before you continue with us on this remarkable journey of courage, conviction, and the fight for equality, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about the individuals who refused to accept injustice and changed history through their bravery and determination. Sergeant Thompson, you're an excellent soldier, but you have to understand that the military has certain traditions and practices that have served us well for generations, explained Major Harrison during the meeting where I questioned the promotion decisions. Women have important roles to play in the Army, but those roles are different from men's roles, and trying to eliminate those differences could undermine the effectiveness of our units. I suggest you focus on excelling in the positions that are appropriate for female personnel rather than questioning policies that are beyond your understanding or authority to change. The condescending tone of his response and the implicit message that I should accept discrimination without complaint crystallized my growing frustration with military policies that limited women's advancement regardless of their qualifications or performance. That evening, I sat in our small base housing unit and made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life and my understanding of what it meant to fight for equality in America. The planning for what would become the first Women's Rights March in Fort Bragg's history began in early July 1974, when I quietly reached out to other female soldiers who had expressed frustration with discriminatory policies and practices that limited our opportunities for advancement and equal treatment. The initial group consisted of 8 women from different units and career fields, ranging in rank from private first class to captain, representing a cross-section of the female military personnel stationed at the base. "We need to be very careful about how we approach this," warned Captain Linda Martinez during our first informal meeting in the base chapel. "The military has ways of dealing with soldiers who are seen as troublemakers, and if we're perceived as challenging military authority or unit cohesion, we could all face serious consequences for our careers and our futures. But if we organize something that focuses on equality and fair treatment, rather than confrontation, we might be able to make our voices heard without crossing lines that would trigger disciplinary action." The discussions that followed over the next 2 weeks were intense and sometimes emotional, as we shared experiences of discrimination, harassment, and professional limitations that had affected all of our military careers. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams, a military police officer, described being excluded from certain assignments because her commanding officer believed that having women in law enforcement roles would create problems with male soldiers. Lieutenant Susan Davis, a nurse, talked about being passed over for leadership positions in favor of less experienced male medical personnel. Every one of us has a story about being told we're not suitable for assignments, promotions, or training opportunities that are automatically available to men with equal or lesser qualifications, I said during one of our planning sessions. Individually, we can file complaints and hope for fair treatment. But individually, we're also easy to ignore or dismiss. Together, we represent the voices of hundreds of women serving at this base who deserve equal opportunities to contribute to the military mission. But the decision to organize a march rather than a petition or formal complaint was based on our belief that visible, peaceful demonstration would be more effective in raising awareness about women's issues while also demonstrating our pride in military service and our commitment to improving the institution from within. We studied the tactics used by civil rights activists and anti-war protesters, adapting their methods to the unique constraints and opportunities presented by military life. The organizing process required careful attention to military regulations and protocols that governed political activities, demonstrations, and public gatherings on military installations. We researched the legal boundaries of what was permissible, consulted with the base legal office about our rights as soldiers and citizens, and designed our demonstration to comply with all applicable rules, while still making a powerful statement about the need for equal treatment of female military personnel. The key is to frame this as a patriotic demonstration by dedicated soldiers who want to serve their country more effectively, explained Captain Martinez, who had emerged as one of our most strategic thinkers. We're not protesting against the military. We're advocating for policies that will make the military stronger by fully utilizing the talents and capabilities of all personnel, regardless of gender. That's a message that even conservative commanders should be able to support. The date selected for the march was July 26, 1974, chosen to coincide with the anniversary of the signing of the United Nations Charter, which included provisions about equal rights and human dignity that we believed supported our cause. The route would begin at the base chapel, proceed down main base thoroughfares, and conclude at the headquarters building where we would present a petition outlining our concerns and recommendations for policy changes. Word of our planned demonstration spread throughout the base despite our efforts to maintain operational security, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and tension that made clear this event would have consequences far beyond the immediate participants. Some female soldiers expressed support, but declined to participate due to concerns about their careers, while others warned us that we were making a serious mistake that could result in disciplinary action or discharge from the military. Sergeant Thompson, I've heard rumors about some kind of women's rights demonstration being planned, said First Sergeant Williams during a counseling session 3 days before the march. I want to make it very clear that any soldier who participates in unauthorized political activities on this installation will face the full consequences of military justice. The Army is not the place for social experiments or political protests, and soldiers who can't accept military discipline and traditions should consider whether they belong in uniform. The threat was explicit and intimidating, but it also strengthened my resolve to proceed with the demonstration as planned. The reaction from military leadership confirmed that our message was being heard and taken seriously, even if the response was hostile rather than supportive. That evening, I called a final meeting of our organizing committee to give everyone the opportunity to withdraw from the march if they were having second thoughts about the risks involved. I won't lie to you, this could end badly for all of us, I told the group assembled in Captain Martinez's quarters. We could face court-martial proceedings, discharge from the military, and damage to our professional reputations that could affect our civilian careers. But if we don't take this stand, who will? If we don't speak up for equal treatment, who will speak for the women who come after us? Sometimes doing what's right requires risking what's safe. The morning of July 26, 1974, dawned clear and hot, with temperatures already climbing toward 95 degrees by 8:00 a.m. when our group assembled at the base chapel for final preparations. 23 women had committed to participating in the march, ranging in age from 19 to 34, representing every major career field and unit stationed at Fort Bragg. We wore dress uniforms with polished brass and regulation haircuts, carrying small American flags and signs with messages like equal service, equal opportunity, and military excellence has no gender. The march itself was both exhilarating and terrifying. As we proceeded down streets lined with curious soldiers, supportive civilians, and grim-faced military police who documented our every step with cameras and note-taking. The demonstration was peaceful and dignified, conducted with military precision and respectful adherence to the traffic regulations and protocols we had studied during our planning phase. Left, right, called Captain Martinez as we marched in formation toward the headquarters building. Remember, we're soldiers first, demonstrators second. We represent every woman who has ever worn this uniform and everyone who will wear it in the future. March with pride and dignity, and remember that history is watching what we do today. The reactions from spectators ranged from supportive applause from some female soldiers and civilian employees to hostile stares and shouted comments from male soldiers who viewed our demonstration as an attack on military traditions and unit cohesion. "Go home and cook dinner," yelled one soldier from the sidewalk. "The army doesn't need feminists," shouted another. But there were also moments of encouragement, including silent thumbs-up gestures from women who couldn't participate, but supported our cause. The arrival at the headquarters building marked the climax of our demonstration, as we arranged ourselves in formation and prepared to present our petition to the commanding general's representative. The petition outlined specific policy recommendations for eliminating discriminatory practices, expanding opportunities for women in non-traditional career fields, and establishing procedures for addressing complaints about gender-based harassment or discrimination. On behalf of the women serving at Fort Bragg, we respectfully request that military leadership review and revise policies that limit our opportunities to contribute fully to the defense of our nation. I read from the petition as television cameras and newspaper reporters documented the historic moment. We are proud to serve, proud to wear the uniform, and committed to excellence in every assignment we receive. We ask only for the chance to prove our capabilities on equal terms with our male counterparts. The immediate aftermath of the march was a mixture of triumph and apprehension, as we realized we had successfully completed the first women's rights demonstration in Fort Bragg's history, while also knowing that the consequences for our actions were yet to be determined. The media coverage was extensive and generally supportive, but the response from military leadership was swift and ominous. The summons to report to the commanding general's office came exactly 48 hours after our march, delivered by a stone-faced military police officer who handed me the official notification with all the formality of a death sentence. "Sergeant Thompson, you are ordered to report to Major General Richardson's office at over 800 hours tomorrow morning in dress uniform for an official inquiry into your conduct during the unauthorized demonstration of July 26, 1974. Failure to appear will result in additional charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice." That sleepless night, I sat with James in our small living room, trying to prepare mentally for what could be the end of my military career, and possibly criminal charges that could affect the rest of my life. "Margaret, maybe it's not too late to apologize and accept whatever punishment they give you without making things worse," James suggested, his voice heavy with worry. "You made your point, people heard your message, and now maybe it's time to focus on protecting your future rather than fighting a battle you can't win." But I knew there was no going back from the choice I had made to stand up for equality and justice. The march had been more than a single event. It had been a statement about who I was and what I believed in, and backing down now would betray not only my own principles, but also the 22 other women who had risked their careers to support our cause. The meeting with Major General Richardson was as intimidating as I had expected, taking place in an oak-paneled office decorated with battle flags, military awards, and photographs of previous commanding officers who had led Fort Bragg through decades of military history. The general was a career infantry officer with combat experience in Korea and Vietnam, a man who represented everything traditional and conservative about military culture. "Sergeant Thompson, you organized and led an unauthorized political demonstration on my installation, in violation of military regulations and proper chain of command procedures," General Richardson began, his voice cold and formal. "Your actions have created division within the ranks, undermined military discipline, and brought unwanted attention to internal military matters that should have been handled through appropriate channels. What do you have to say for yourself? My response was carefully prepared but delivered from the heart, representing not just my own views, but the hopes and frustrations of every woman who had supported our march. Sir, I accept full responsibility for organizing the demonstration, but I believe our actions were consistent with our oath to support and defend the Constitution, which guarantees equal protection under the law. We followed all applicable regulations regarding peaceful assembly, and our message was about strengthening the military by utilizing the full potential of all personnel regardless of gender. The general's reaction was swift and unforgiving. Sergeant Thompson, the military is not a democracy, and social change is not achieved through unauthorized demonstrations that challenge military authority. Your actions constitute a serious breach of military discipline, and I am recommending that you face court-martial proceedings for violations of Article 92, failure to obey orders and regulations, and Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. The court-martial proceedings that followed were a media circus that brought national attention to issues of women's rights in the military, while also subjecting me to intense scrutiny and character assassination from prosecutors who portrayed me as a dangerous radical, seeking to destroy military traditions and effectiveness. The trial lasted 3 weeks and featured testimony from dozens of witnesses, including military experts, women's rights advocates, and fellow soldiers who had participated in or observed our demonstration. My defense attorney, Captain Robert Martinez, argued that the demonstration had been a legitimate exercise of constitutional rights that was protected by military regulations governing peaceful assembly and political expression. Sergeant Thompson and her colleagues were exercising their rights as American citizens and their responsibilities as military professionals who identified problems that needed to be addressed, he told the court. Their actions were motivated by love of country and commitment to military excellence, not by any desire to undermine authority or military discipline. The prosecution's case relied heavily on testimony from military leaders who argued that unauthorized demonstrations threatened the chain of command and unit cohesion that were essential for military effectiveness. The military cannot function if every soldier feels free to organize protests whenever they disagree with policies or decisions, argued the prosecuting attorney. Sergeant Thompson's actions, regardless of her motivations, represent a dangerous precedent that could encourage other unauthorized political activities that would undermine military discipline and readiness. The testimony from other participants in the march was both inspiring and heartbreaking, as they described their own experiences with discrimination, while also facing potential consequences for their support of our demonstration. Captain Martinez, Staff Sergeant Williams, and Lieutenant Davis all testified about specific incidents of unequal treatment while affirming their commitment to military service and their belief that our demonstration had been appropriate and necessary. I participated in the march because I believe the military is stronger when it treats all personnel fairly and provides equal opportunities for advancement based on merit rather than gender, testified Captain Martinez. Sergeant Thompson showed courage and leadership in organizing a peaceful demonstration that raised awareness about important issues affecting military effectiveness and morale. Her actions reflect the highest traditions of military service and American values. The character witnesses who testified on my behalf included former commanding officers, civilian supervisors, and fellow soldiers who spoke about my professionalism, dedication, and positive contributions to military units throughout my career. Sergeant Thompson is one of the finest soldiers I have ever had the privilege to command, testified Colonel Williams, my former battalion commander. Her commitment to excellence and her leadership abilities have made every unit she has served stronger and more effective. Her participation in the women's rights demonstration reflects the same dedication to improvement and excellence that has characterized her entire military career. The verdict, when it finally came after deliberations that lasted 2 days, was a compromise that reflected the complexity of the issues involved and the political pressures surrounding the case. I was found guilty of violating regulations regarding unauthorized demonstrations, but was acquitted of the more serious charges related to conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. The sentence included a formal reprimand, reduction in rank to corporal, and 6 months of additional duty, but no discharge from the military or confinement. Sergeant Thompson, this court recognizes that your actions were motivated by sincere beliefs about equality and justice, but military regulations exist for important reasons and cannot be violated without consequences, announced the presiding judge. Your sentence reflects both the seriousness of your violations and the court's recognition of your previous exemplary service and the peaceful nature of your demonstration. The aftermath of the court-martial was bittersweet, as I had avoided the worst possible consequences while still facing significant professional and personal costs for my actions. The reduction in rank meant lost income and delayed career progression, while the formal reprimand would remain on my military record permanently. But the trial had also brought national attention to issues of women's rights in the military and had inspired similar demonstrations at other military installations. The policy changes that followed our demonstration were gradual but significant, including revised regulations governing women's assignments, improved procedures for addressing discrimination complaints, and expanded opportunities for female personnel in previously restricted career fields. Your march may have cost you personally, but it opened doors for thousands of women who will serve after you, wrote Captain Martinez in a letter she sent me after her promotion to major. That's a legacy worth the sacrifices you made. The decision to leave the military in 1975, rather than continue fighting for full restoration of my rank and reputation, was difficult, but necessary for my mental health and my marriage. James had supported me throughout the court-martial proceedings, but the stress and publicity had taken a toll on both of us, and we needed time to rebuild our relationship and plan our civilian future. Margaret, you did something important that needed to be done, and history will remember your courage and determination, James told me on my last day in uniform. Now it's time to build a life where you can continue fighting for justice without having to battle the institution you're trying to serve. Your military career is ending, but your real work is just beginning. The civilian career that followed included work with veterans organizations, women's rights groups, and educational institutions that were developing programs to help female veterans transition to civilian life. The experience of organizing the Fort Bragg Women's Rights March and surviving the court-martial proceedings had given me skills and credibility that proved valuable in advocacy work and public speaking engagements. Looking back on the events of July 1974, I understand that organizing the first Women's Rights March at Fort Bragg was both the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another. The military career that I had loved and dedicated myself to was forever changed by my decision to stand up for equality, but the principles that motivated that decision continued to guide my work and my relationships for the rest of my life. The legacy of our march lives on in the expanded opportunities that female military personnel enjoy today, the policies that protect against discrimination and harassment, and the understanding that military effectiveness is enhanced rather than diminished when all personnel are treated fairly and given equal opportunities to contribute their talents and abilities to the defense of our nation. The court-martial that could have destroyed me actually strengthened my resolve and deepened my understanding of what it means to fight for justice in America. Sometimes doing what's right requires risking what's safe, and sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign battlefields, but in the struggle for equality and human dignity at home.